My mothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So today is pretty much, we're coming close to the end of Azadari, right? And the topic that we've been discussing throughout this month is the concept of emotional intelligence, or what we termed as using our aql to guide our life. And what we've been discussing is basically that, Allah is not opposed to emotions. The Quran, in fact, uses emotion many a times to get a message across. He has created us with emotion. And the idea is that although we have emotions, sometimes those emotions can lead us down the wrong path. Now, many of us know that, for example, when we're in conflict with someone, we get angry. We very often say things, do things which we later live to regret, right? So the idea is that anger, has a very important role in our lives. The problem is that when we act out of anger. So anger is giving us a message, basically, right? What is it doing? It's telling us that something that's happening is not right. It is against our values. So say, for example, something upsets you, So one of the examples that I often give is that people park in the wrong way, or they're driving in a certain way, right? And these things really seem to upset us. Now, again, what is the value behind that upset? It is that people should follow rules, right? That's what upsets us. Now, the problem happens, obviously, is when we get upset at this and we start giving people tickets in our head, right? So we start, we have a scorecard in our head and we're telling them, they shouldn't do this and they shouldn't do that, and, all of that. And sometimes we act out of our anger, we do road rage, we may, use some language which we're not very proud of, or say things which we later regret, right? So the idea is not that emotion itself is a problem because it's giving you a message, right? But what you do with that emotion sometimes can become a problem. So we've been discussing this concept of emotional intelligence, and we said that emotional intelligence, or what we renamed, not EQ, but AQ, dealing with our aql. And the reason why we picked that is because in Islam, the concept of intelligence is very different from the West. So in West, when we talk about intelligence, it means being smart in school, or doing well, or learning easily. But when we look at the Quran and we see how Allah uses the concept of intelligence, it's very different. So for example, in the West, we could have an idea of an evil genius. Have you ever heard that? So somebody who is very, very smart, has a lot of, brain power, but uses it for the wrong reason. Uses it to harm people rather than help, uses it for destruction rather than building, right? And in Islam, a person like that would not be called intelligent. Because in Islam, the idea of aql is that it should take us to our ultimate good, which is the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that make sense? So we renamed it and we said what we are actually talking about is not EQ, which is emotional intelligence. What we're talking about is AQ, aql, the concept of using our aql. And we spent quite a bit of time understanding that, but the concept of EQ, emotional intelligence, as it is described by Daniel Goleman, some of you may be familiar with his work. The things that he lays out as emotional intelligence are very, very useful, right? So he says there's 5 concepts, which is, the first is self-awareness. In other words, I need to be aware of my emotions. Sometimes, little things are bothering us and our internal temperature is being raised, but we're not aware of it. Then when we flip our lid and we lose it, we say, I don't know where that came from, right? If we practice self-awareness, we would actually be able to stop that eruption of volcano before it got to that state, right? The second part of it is emotional regulation. In other words, using our emotions for positive action, not acting out on those emotions so that we get into trouble, both in this life and the next, right? And then we have empathy and compassion. Once we deal with our own selves, how do we relate to other people? So it all fits in, right? It's a plan. So the second part of it, once you are emotionally aware of yourself, you're able to regulate your emotions, not act on them. Then what do? you are able to deal with others based on the concept of empathy and compassion. And lastly, we build relationships based on that. So we talked also about the building of relationships, the foundation of it being rahma. So again, in these days, those of you who are fans of Brené Brown and all of this know all about empathy, right? But we discussed a little bit what is the difference between empathy and compassion, and how Islam recommends that especially believers have to deal with each other always on the basis of rahma, which is, we could translate it as compassion, mercy, all of that, okay? Now, a middle part of emotional intelligence, which we have not discussed yet, is the concept, where we discuss self-control a little bit, but is the idea of discipline, is the idea of taking action. And, that's what, inshallah, we're going to be discussing too. And for those of you who wanted to catch up, this year, all of the lectures previously are on a Facebook page, as well as, I haven't uploaded all of them on the podcast, but inshallah, all the audios will be available for those of you who want to catch up. So I thought it might be a very good idea to end this season of mourning with actually taking stock on what we have done. So all of us, we've gone to at least, I would say, 30 plus lectures. At least, right? Some of us are like champions. We go to like 3, 4, 5 weekend, right? So if I was to ask you, how is your life different today than it was on the 1st of Muharram? What have you acted upon? What have you taken out of that knowledge? Because here's the thing, when we go to majalis, when we're in the car, what are we talking about? How is the speaker? How is the food? How are the arrangements? And we have all of these judgments, about the speaker, about the food and all of that, right? But if we ask ourselves one of the questions, what is the goal of majalis, number one? And number two, if this is the conversation we're having, how is it helping us in our lives? So please feel free. Can you tell me a little bit about how your life has changed? What have you applied? Anyone?
To be more patient.
Okay, good. And so what does that look like? How would I know that you have been to a majlis and you are doing something different than what you were doing?
Like if somebody gets mad at me or somebody gets frustrated, I should be calm and act in a positive way.
Okay. And so that's what you've been practicing?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Very good. Okay. What else?
Quran.
So what about the Quran?
To take an ayah a day.
Okay.
And reflect upon it, ponder upon it, and try and act upon it.
Okay, excellent. That's a really, something that you can see, right? Something that you can assess what you've been doing. What else? And what's your commitment, by the way? How long are you going to continue?
Read.
Yeah.
Inshallah, daily.
Okay.
Trying to pull
So,
the kids into do the same thing.
sorry?
Trying to pull the kids to do the same
Okay,
thing.
excellent. So what this lady said was that she's taking an ayah of the Quran and she is reflecting on it, reading it, and trying to apply it daily in your life. And you're doing it with your kids?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. What else? Anyone else? Okay, so we've listened to how many lectures? So, and this is quite common, right? I don't mean to pick on you guys, but it's also as much for myself as for everyone else, right? Honestly, now we're not going to get this chance till next year. We're not going to put aside our daily lives, our weekends, all of it to, a friend of mine used to say that, the Muharram ka chand comes up and we all udo our chadars and we're out of the house, right? And the idea is it is such an opportunity. And if we, so it's not, all is not lost. Honestly, I recommend that we all sit down before, it's already Rabiul Awwal, right? Just sit down for 5 minutes today before you go to sleep and literally ask yourself, and it could be a mind shift. It could actually, it doesn't have to be like, you know, what I like about concrete examples is that you can see them, measure them, all of that, right? But if it has been a mindset, in other words, I'm beginning to look at my sister with more compassion. You know, that's a huge change in your life, right? It's going to help you, it's going to help her, it's going to help both of you, right? So literally sit down, because it would be such a, it would be really sad, you know, to have all of this opportunity and not use it. So today let's talk about very briefly, why is it important to take action on what we know, right? What happens if we don't take any action? Like, how will our lives be any different? And what are some of the barriers that we have to taking action? Because this is something that we need to recognize, that, you know, why is it? What is stopping us? You know, we hear so much. Like, I really believe that our community as a whole, you know, people say, oh, these, you know, we can't pay attention these days, and the attention span has, you know, you know that, right? That the attention span now of a child is about the size of a goldfish. You know, that's what research is telling us, right? And I'm like, not in our community. We can sit and we can listen to lecture after lecture after lecture for hours. It's like, it's something to be congratulated as, right? It's not obvious. So, and the third part is, how can we begin to turn our knowledge into action? What are some of the things we can do in order to turn this into knowledge, into action, right? So let's see what the Quran tells us, why it is imperative to take action now. So this is from Surah Munafiqun, where Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and spend out of that which we have given you before death comes to one of you, and he says, my Lord, if you would only reprieve me for a little while, I would give in charity and become of the righteous of the good deeds, right? In other words, what is this person doing? And it could be about charity, it could be any good deed, right? That at the end of our lives, we will, you know, because it's very common, right? That when we are nearing the end, and we don't know when that is, by the way, but we begin to take stock of what we have achieved. And I don't know about you, but some days, you know, when I think about how much time I have spent on social media, how much time I have spent on WhatsApp groups, because here's the thing, if somebody, you know, sends us something, we think, oh wow, here's a good deed, I can forward that. Is that a good deed? Without reading it, without acting on it, just clogging up people's inboxes. It's not a good deed. It's really not. We tell ourselves that, you know, we are doing such a good thing, mashallah, we are doing tabligh. But what does the Quran tell us? What you do, what you do not, you say what you do not do, right? So, you know, one of the, and I've mentioned this I don't know how many times, you know, if we make an intention not to forward anything that we do not A, read, and 2, intend to act upon. Does that make sense? Because by, you know, just by passing it on, others passing it on, and, you know, it's, how is it helping us? We need to keep asking ourselves this question all the time. How is this adding value to my life? Okay. In another verse in the Quran, Allah says, and he shall say, oh, would that I had sent before for this my life. Yaqulu ya laytani qaddamtu li hayati. If only I had sent something beforehand for my life. My life means my real life, right? The life which I'm going to live forever. So the Quran is continuously reminding us. It is reminding us that where we end up is going to be based on our actions, not on how much we know. In fact, our knowledge will become a burden. Because here's the thing, if I don't know something, right, I can't really be called to task for it, right? But all of us, you know, I'm so proud of the Shia community. I really believe that an 8-year-old knows more than a lot of Muslim communities around the world. Why? Because we have this institution. Which other community on the planet takes out 2.5 months every single year to focus on themselves? It's really quite inspiring and quite outstanding, right? So what is regret? So the Quran keeps talking about regret. What exactly is regret? Regret is when you have the opportunity to act and you don't, right? Or you have the opportunity to stop yourself from acting and you don't, number one. Number two, in your head, in your imagination, you know that if you had taken a different step, the outcome would have been different, right? What research shows, very interestingly, is that the closer you are to your goal, the more regret you will feel. So let me give you an example. Say if you're going on a trip, you're going to a friend's wedding and you're just running just a little bit late, like we all do, right? And of course, like today when I came, I was running just a little bit late, but then when I reached the gas station, the pump, like the speed pass wasn't working and there was nobody in the, in the thing, and I was going crazy, okay? But how often do we do this? So you reach the airport and you are just about 3 minutes late and the checkout has closed and the next flight is not there and you miss. Can you see how you would be much more regretful of those 3 minutes rather than if you had like 2 hours, something came up and you just couldn't make it, right? When you're so close to your goal, there is a lot more regret. But here's the thing, that the Masumeen keep advising us that we don't have to do big things. We just have to keep taking little actions, And how do we remember to take little actions? So, one of the Aimma were asked that how do I convince myself to take action all the time, right? And they said, every time you attend a funeral, imagine that it is you lying there. Now, after the funeral is finished and when you come home, imagine that you have a new life, that you've been given a new life. Now, how are you going to use it? This we can do, every single time that we hear of a death, or because very often when people are near death experiences and, they're given a second lease of life, they change their lives, right? A lot of times we hear that. But we don't have to wait for that because we may not get that chance, right? We can use what is around us to make different decisions, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he said to Abu Zar, with the passing of days and nights, your age decreases and your deeds are recorded. Death comes suddenly. One who sows good will harvest good, and one who sows evil will soon harvest regret. In fact, each who sows will gain that which he sows, right? Now, the idea, of course, is to use our time wisely. Because when we are young, we think, oh, it's so much time. And we all have experienced this, right? That each year seems to be passing quicker and quicker. And before we know it, it's the end of the year and the end of Muharram and another one to come, right? So how are we using our time? So again, putting, all of the researchers giving you a summary of what people regret, right? And you've all read the book or heard of the book, at least the 5 things that people regret, but that's not what we're talking about. The first thing is to just live unconsciously, to not examine your life, to just go with the flow. And when you come to the end, you recognize that, what, I could have made if only I had, right? Being reactionary rather than proactive. So waiting for the whole life to change, waiting for other people to change, because how is that going to work out for us? Waiting for other people to change before we do anything. Wasting time on the wrong things. Or not even forget wrong. I'm not going to call them wrong. But, if we were to invest our money, would we put millions of dollars into things which are going to give us no return whatsoever? We would want some return for our investment, right? Similarly, what the way Masumeen explained it to us is think of your life as a bazaar. And your capital is, you're buying stuff, right? So the capital is your time. What are you exchanging your time for? Is that going to be something that matters in the long run? Or, next week when you think about where your time goes, you have no idea, right? I often think, when we're going to the mosque, for example, it takes us sometimes 3 hours to get ready, right? Where do we put that time? Where is that time going to be slotted, and what return is that going to give us? So we go there looking our best and wanting people's approval. Now here's the thing, everyone is there to see how nice they're looking, and they're also looking for approval, right? So who is this person who's going to give us the approval? And what are we doing it for? I mean, please don't get me wrong, look nice, but everything, the idea is that your time is your biggest, it's your biggest capital, it's your biggest asset. So don't exchange it for what the Quran calls samanan qalilan. Don't give away your life for things that don't matter. So why anyway is it so easy to waste time and not to take action? So how many people get inspired by a lecture? I do, right? And then what happens? So say, I go to a lecture and I'm told, what, you must, educate yourself and you must start a book club. Okay, let's just take a very small example. So I come very inspired. Okay, I'm going to start a book club. Now what happens? I go home and life takes over. So the inspiration has gone. The motivation has tiptoed down the window, down the stairs. There's no more motivation. So now what am I going to tell myself? Next year, okay, or tomorrow, right? Why? Because we are always human beings, and there's a lot of research about procrastination which tells us that human beings always overestimate the time tomorrow or next week, and they underestimate what they can do today. Okay? So, again, the Imam remind us is that Allah has mercy on him who, when he hears about a good action or intends a good action, runs to take action. Right? Why? And takes out the hopes of a long life from that picture. This is just the most modern explanation of how procrastination works. Because what the scientists now, social scientists tell us, is that the more you delay, we think, okay, tomorrow, next week, next month, whatever. The more you delay something, it makes it less likely that it will happen. So if you say, I will start a book club next month or next year, it's much less likely to happen than if you start it now. Okay, because again, the opportunity has also gone, right? So again, Imam Ali alayhi salam tells us that opportunities are like clouds. You know how clouds come and go? They go. Before you know it, you blink. Sometimes, you get, you really want to help someone or you want to donate money somewhere. And before you know it, the opportunity is gone and you're off with your life, right? Another thing which I find, especially, with the younger generation, and even us, all of us today, we want to have it all figured out. We want to have it all figured out before we will take a single step, So again, imagine you're going on a road on a dark night. So you know where you're going, right? You have you have a destination in mind, but it's foggy and your lights can only see 100 meters. Will you stop because you can't see the rest of the road? No, you're going to keep going because you have enough information how to go the next 100 meters, right? Similarly, you do not need to see the entire staircase to take the first step. It's only, we think, okay, when I'm motivated, I'll take action. But what science tells us is that it is the action which creates the motivation. It's the action and it's the commitment. So sometimes, especially when you're working towards something big, you want to establish something, you want to write, you want to speak, you want to create, guaranteed you start and you will not want to do it. I always think of writing as giving birth to a baby. Really. It is very painful. When you are writing like a long piece, not just a few words, when you're writing, it is, I feel like that, you're going through labor pains. It is. It's very, very challenging. And the only time you feel good or relieved is when it's out. It's done, okay? So similarly, when you're working towards something concrete or something big, motivation will not carry you. It is only your commitment and the willingness to keep going. That's why, the Prophet ﷺ reminds us, keep taking action till your last breath. Don't give up. And, a very good image is that, say you were walking in a desert, right? And you were really thirsty and there was no water. And the only thing that kept you going was because you knew if you stopped, you would die. And you went on, you finally overcame a hill, or you went on top of a hill which you thought you could not take another step. And what do you see? You see an oasis. If you had stopped just short, you would have not found water, right? So very often, the breakthrough or achieving something is just before, you want to give up just before you succeed. If you are working for a Quranic, to learn a part of the Quran, for example, right? There will be times when it will be very hard, and only your motivation will keep you going. Okay, motivation means discipline and commitment. Your motivation will be because and sometimes we look at, talking about having it all figured out. Do you know the Wright brothers? Probably the younger people don't, but they're the ones who invented the first flight, right? The first long flight. So what they did was, every time they would fail, they were just the two of them. So they went back into their workshop and they would start tinkering. There were big companies, transportation companies, who were working at the same time to develop the aircraft. But every time they came across a hurdle, they would have a big meeting, sit down, try to figure it all out. Meanwhile, these guys would just go and keep practicing till they got it, right? So it's not that you don't plan, but sometimes planning, and it's used as a distraction, right? Another thing that we use as a distraction is gaining more knowledge. Isn't it? I don't know about you, but I'm like, okay, I just need to find one missing piece. As long as I find this piece, as long as I know about this, then I can take action. You know what? There is no substitute for doing the thing, making mistakes, and then learning. So we have this thing called ready, fire, aim. What motivational people tell us is that ready, fire, and then aim. Means keep taking action, you'll get feedback, right? So say you want to learn Quran, and you have, so you decide on a course of action, you start doing it, and it doesn't work. For whatever reason, the thing doesn't work, this strategy that you haven't, that you established doesn't work, right? If you keep taking action, you can regroup your strategy. You can learn from your mistakes and then keep going. So we look at others and we are discouraged. So we see all of these people who achieve things in life and we think, oh my God, I don't have what it takes. Look at them. Like, I don't know about you, but whenever I see these people who recite Quran so beautifully, or, just have everything at the tip of their tongues. But what I'm not seeing is the thousands of hours that they have spent learning that skill, right? Nobody is born with any of it. You just practice, and then you become better with it, right? So how do we do this, right? How do we begin turning our knowledge into action? So Imam Ali alayhi salam says, failure is a consequence of fear, that is fear of taking action, just as deprivation comes as a result of timidity to seize opportunities. Opportunities flee away like the clouds, so seize the opportunity for doing good. In other words, keep in motion, okay? So 3 things which always spiritual, the ulama tell us is musharata, muraqaba, and muhasaba. Musharata means make commitments, have a goal. Human beings are what we call teleological creatures. We need a target to aim for. So have a purpose, have a goal, have a SMART goal if possible. In other words, be specific. So if you're working on patience, that seems, I will be more patient, right? A more specific goal would be, when my husband is losing his temper, I will not speak up. Okay, that's a specific goal. When my daughter goes into her room and bangs the door behind her, at that point, I will not go and open the door and barge in and say what I need to. I will later, by the way, for the phone, but not at that time. Okay, does that make sense? So the more specific your goal is, why does the goal need to be specific? It is because I know whether I'm succeeding or not. I know where I am, right? So make commitments to yourself, pre-commit. If you're watching your weight, how do you pre-commit? You know that if you're going out for lunch, there will be temptation there. So you pre-commit by knowing, okay, this is what I'm not going to eat, and here's how I'm going to prepare, right? Same thing with goals. The other thing is to muraqaba, means to be watchful. Watchful over the process rather than outcome. If I keep looking at the outcome, I'm going to get lost. So although I have a goal, what do I need to focus on is the one step, the one step, the one step. If I keep looking at say if I want to learn the 30th juz of the Quran by heart, that goal is going to seem overwhelming at some point, right? But if I focus, today what can I do? I can learn my 2 ayat and just focus on that, right? So the more you focus on the process, the more you focus on, because here's the thing, the outcome is actually never in our hand. It's always in God's hand. So we may try to do whatever, and things will happen around us and we may never reach our destination. But thank God that He does not judge us from how far we've gotten. He doesn't. He only judges us based on our intention and the effort that we've made, right? So, and the last thing is obviously muhasaba. Muhasaba means keep track. If you keep track on how you're doing, it is, first of all, very encouraging. That's what gives you motivation. So if you're working on patience, for example, and you look at your week and you say, you know what, there were three times when I could have lost, I could have said something which I would in the past, and this time I didn't. So it gives you motivation, it gives you feedback on how you're doing, and it encourages you to keep going, right? So, moving forward, what do we do? Pick one thing. Anything. It doesn't have to be the best thing. It doesn't have to be, oh, this is not the right thing, that is the wrong. You know what? These are all, I believe strongly, Shaitan's ways of distracting us from our ultimate purpose, right? So just all the voices in your head, just let them be, let them say whatever they want. Pick one thing. Pick one thing today that you will. So again, like I said, so the first part is to see what called out to you during these 2.5 months, right? What is it, something that inspired you that you would like to take action on? And so operationalize that. In other words, see what are you going to do differently? How are you going to think differently? How is your life going to be different if you were to live this, okay? So the idea obviously is that, I'd like to end with a story. And it reminds me of a hadith of Imam Ali alayhi salam where he says, everyone who dies regrets. The doer of good regrets that he had not done more, and the doer of evil regrets that he had done any. Okay, so there's a story about these people. They were spiritual seekers, and they were told go into this cave, and come out of the other side. And the only instructions they were given was that you may see things lying around, and if you pick them up, you will regret it, and if you don't pick them up, you will regret it, right? Very strange. So anyway, they weren't told anymore, so they go in, and sure enough, they see what looked like, coal lying all over the place, and some of them picked up a few, thinking, if we don't pick it up, we'll regret it. The others didn't pick up any, saying if we pick it up, we will regret it, right? When they come out of the cave on the other side, they realized actually that what those things were diamonds. So the people who had picked up a few were very regretful that they didn't pick up any, they didn't pick up more, right? And the ones who had picked up a few, had not picked up any, you can imagine, were very, very regretful, right? And this is what our life is. All around us, we have the opportunity to do good and to make something of our lives, right? To have goals and to meet those goals. And the more we use those opportunities, we will regret it less on what is called Yomul Hasra, right? The day of regret. And of course, if we just let the opportunities pass by and keep forwarding stuff on WhatsApp, we may regret it a little bit more, right?